Time is absolutely flying by, man, and we're about at the halfway point of 2024, depending on when you're watching this. And despite being at the halfway point of the year, we haven't even hit the big holiday season yet. We've already had plenty of awesome games this year. While yes, the gaming news headlines are full of gloom and doom, there are still plenty of solid things to play. We got 20 games we're talking about today, so let's get started off with number 20. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown released a few months back and is absolutely great. It's a really awesome return to form for the Prince of Persia series. While yeah, you're not actually technically playing as the prince, you're playing as Sargon, a kind of god in Persian mythology here. It's a throwback in terms of simple 2D straightforward platforming, but with a lot of really awesome action. The Lost Crown is challenging, creative, and fun with a good Prince of Persia feel to it. You're running, you're jumping, you're wall running, you're manipulating time to dodge booby traps and kill enemies, and it is so satisfying to play. Combat is thrilling, the gameplay and movement is really fluid and smooth. I can't say enough good things about The Lost Crown. If you like 2D action-adventure, Metroidvania style games, but you want something with more of a Prince of Persia flair, consider this. Next, over at number 19, we have Banishers: Ghosts of New Eden. This game flew under the radar for some people because it's not really a mainstream concept, but it's still really cool. Essentially, you play as a ghost hunter in a kind of weird alternate history 1600s. Not only are you a ghost hunter, but your partner also is. But unfortunately, they die at the beginning of the game. So it's you, the ghost hunter, and your ghost wife going around trying to solve mysteries. The game has exploration and some okay combat, but really it's about the questing, the missions, the going around talking to NPCs, gathering clues, figuring out what's going on with these spirits, and deciding whether or not to banish them. It's got a lot of good RPG conversational dialogue depth that you probably would really want to sink your teeth into. Speaking of teeth, if you played Vampire or Vampire, this is a game similar to that. It's from the same people, but it's creative. It's got something a little different going on here. It's not a perfect game, but it's cool. Next, over at number 18, we have Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. This game is just fun factor up the wazoo. It takes the Yakuza franchise and really brings it in a new direction. I know the previous game did, but this game takes it even further with Ichi and also the classic and legendary Kiryu, and brings them through a fun, lighthearted adventure that also has a lot of introspection, and it does get deep. But really, you're dropped into a fun, colorful, new tropical setting with tons of fun diversions, even better turn-based combat, and just a lot to really keep you busy with. The Like a Dragon games have really developed into their own new identity compared to the old Yakuza games, and they are incredibly special. People really love this one for a reason. Next, over at number 17, we have Persona 3 Reload. This is a remake, re-release of the original classic beloved Persona 3. For some people, this is when Persona really started getting on a good streak, but whatever you think about the series, this is a great place to start. It's got really cool vibes, a very different aesthetic, great combat, incredibly memorable characters, and frankly, it's just a JRPG worth experiencing. There's a reason why they re-released this thing, and there's a reason why we're including an older game re-released on this list. It's that good. Next, over at number 16, we have Elden Ring: The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Now, this is a DLC expansion, of course, but this is a long-awaited one for a beloved game, and frankly, it's absolutely massive. You're getting almost a whole game here. Not as long as the original base Elden Ring, but still something you can pour hours and hours and hours into, exploring an entirely new region, fighting new bosses, embracing new gameplay and progression mechanics. Erdtree really has a lot. It's pretty much everything you'd want in an expansion, and also a FromSoft expansion. It's one of their best ones. They really know how to do it, and there's absolutely a lot of cool shit to be had here. This is a new release, and it's definitely going to be the one that Elden Ring fans are going to be playing for a while. Trust us. Next, over at number 15, we have Balatro. Now, you may not have heard of Balatro, but all you need to know is that it's a poker roguelike. It's all about building deck hands, like making big moves and getting big combo scores. Keep in mind, also, you don't need to be a poker player or like a poker or cards person to really get into this. It's easy to jump in and understand, and anybody that has become absolutely addicted to it. What seems like a silly little light game on the surface is a game that has taken Steam by storm. Like how a year or so ago, the big addictive and unassuming game was Vampire Survivors, now it's Balatro. There's a reason why this game is overwhelmingly positive on Steam. It's awesome on Steam Deck. It's coming to mobile at some point. Either way, it's one of the best and most addictive games of the year so far. Next, over at number 14, we have Animal Well. This is an indie game published by Big Mode, the publisher founded by YouTuber Donkey. And their first game is a banger. Animal Well is awesome. It's essentially like a low-key exploration Metroidvania with no guns or swords or combat or anything like that, but just vibes and really clever puzzles and interesting environments. The game is visually absolutely gorgeous. The sound design, the visual effects, everything going on here is incredibly satisfying and pleasing to look at and experience, and this game has had puzzle people and Metroidvania people hooked for a while. It's filled with secrets and just lots of creativity. You haven't played anything else really like Animal Well this year, I can guarantee you that. Next, over at number 13, we have Enshrouded. This big open world voxel-based RPG feels a bit different than what you'd usually play just because it's very much a survival crafting focused game, but it also doesn't get itself lost in the drudgery of that. This game is still first and foremost about RPGing, questing, exploring. The developers had Zelda as an inspiration, but really it's just a fun game to play alone or with friends because it feels like a cut above your average survival RPG thing. A lot of those are frankly pretty busted, but Enshrouded feels quality. It's got a cool world to explore with multiple layers. You can play with up to 16 players, and it's been well received, very positive on Steam. We've enjoyed it, but it's only in early access, so there's more to come, and ideally it can only get better and better from here. We'll be watching this one's career with great interest. Next, over at number 12, if we're talking about early access games, we also have Hades 2. Despite being an early access game, this one feels pretty complete. There is like a full-ass game to play through here, and it's more Hades. I don't think that's a bad thing. Obviously, there's a bit more going on, but if you did play the original, you know what you're in for at this point. A really, really fun hack and slash roguelike that is just so much fun to play. Visually, gameplay-wise, everything here is just totally on point. And at this point, the developers, Supergiant Games, behind so many things like Pyre, Bastion, Transistor, they really know what they're doing. They've really got their formula figured out. But with like a sequel to Hades, it's allowed them to really refine and blow out those concepts even further. Plus, you get new characters, new music, new art, just all that stuff that they're really good at. But most importantly, at the end of the day, it's fun to play. The combat absolutely kicks ass. Like I said, this is another one in early access, so ideally, hopefully, it only gets even better from here. Now, at number 11, we're sticking with the early access thing, and we're talking about Manor Lords. This has become a smash hit on PC, developed by a very, very small independent studio. Manor Lords has really kind of taken some PC folks by Steam because it's a really great hybrid. You got your big scale tactical medieval battles, but it's also a city builder, and a city builder with like some economic depth. It's also incredibly well detailed, and it's got a little bit more of like a realistic feel to it, and it really does make good on the whole like you ruling your lands, like you actually being this like medieval lord. You have a lot of control over the city building aspects. The seasons change. You're worried about your citizens, you're worried about food, but of course you're worried about other kingdoms and warfare. It really is ambitious, and it takes on a lot, and for such a small team to absolutely nail it already so far, that's really impressive. We did it before you buy on it, we absolutely enjoyed it, but there's some things it could definitely use down the line, and we're thinking that with the success of just the launch of the early access, they have the resources and opportunity to make this game even better throughout 2024 and beyond. Next, over at number 10, Final Fantasy Rebirth. Yes, the follow-up to Final Fantasy VII Remake is absolutely awesome. It continues the trend of absolutely blowing out the original Final Fantasy VII, showing us more of those worlds, more detail, more life, and continuing the story of Cloud, Tifa, Sephiroth, and everything in between. Obviously, there are definitely some wrinkles in this story, but what you get with this one is a massive JRPG adventure with open world elements. There's just a lot more going on here compared to Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is like a full meal of a game, I'll tell you that. If you can't get enough of those characters, like we certainly can't, you definitely should jump into this. Now, next over at number 9, if you're looking for something a little bit different, consider Nine Souls. This released recently on Steam by small developer and publisher Red Candle Games, and it absolutely took Steam by storm. This one went a little viral because it's just a fun 2D action platformer adventure game. So you play as almost like a cat-like badass little creature on a quest to slay 9 of these big ruling gods. And you're jumping around, you're platforming, you're quick attacking, and it's just an absolute blast. Definitely requires some serious skill, and I would say, even though it's a very different style game, if you're still waiting for Hollow Knight Silksong, I'd say try Nine Souls. This can be a very challenging 2D, almost Souls-like game, but like I said, the art style, the skill tree, the combat feel, everything here is absolutely awesome. I know we've talked about a lot of Metroidvanias on this list already, but this one is a cut above. It really feels refined and almost perfected in a lot of ways. Next, over at number 8, we have Tekken 8. See what we did there? There's a new Tekken, and it's absolutely awesome. They're continuing to introduce new characters to it, and if you're not playing Street Fighter, chances are you're probably playing Tekken. This one plays great, it feels great, it looks great, and how they've managed to make Tekken feel this fresh after all these years, how they continue to do it, I don't know. Maybe it's just the lovable characters, maybe it's the feel of the fights, or maybe just a little bit of everything, you know, just like a little special spark. I don't know what it is, but Tekken 8 is absolutely awesome. The only problem is that it still doesn't have a Waffle House fight arena. That's been like a thing going viral online, people asking Harada for a Waffle House stage. I still really want one. I'm putting my hat in the ring for that. Either way, memeing aside, Tekken 8 is awesome, and if you like a fighting game, either casual or hardcore, this has a little bit of something for everyone. I know that's like a cliched phrase at this point, but really. Next, over at number 7, we have Palworld, the game that was initially dubbed as Pokemon with Guns, actually is a lot more. It's more like Ark Survival Evolved with some Pokemon in it. Palworld is a survival game first and foremost, through and through, and with that, all of the awkwardness, the jank, you know. But despite that, adding the Pokemon or monster collecting and training element just makes it so much better. This game is still in early access and definitely needs a lot more, you know, more worlds, more bosses, more story, more refined mechanics, some fixes to the glitches and bugs, but people went nuts for this game for a reason. There's something about it that is just so appealing. Is it like maybe the addictive Pokemon loops mixed with the survival game crafting stuff and how those kind of work together? I think so. I think that's probably the magic ingredient here. Either way, Palworld is cool, but it's a great start. It still feels like it's only just the beginning, and we're hoping that with that game going so viral, it just becomes a bigger and better thing over time. Next, over at number 6, we have Senua Saga, Hellblade 2. Now, I don't think this is as good as the first game. Unfortunately, I had some issues with this one. But still, even despite that, the game has found an audience. We've seen a lot of people that dug this one just as much as the original, if not more. This is a very story-focused game. It's a very simple game to play. There's not too much to it, but it does have some harrowing combat moments and some exciting bits and set pieces. And the best thing I can say about it is that it is very different. You know, from a story standpoint to just a visual aesthetic, a setting, style, you've never really played another game quite like this one. Again, it's a simple game to play, but it's still an experience nonetheless. And if you get it for cheap or if you get it on Game Pass, it'll only take you a few hours to complete, but it is quite the adventure. Next, down at number 5, we have Helldivers 2, the multiplayer game that took PlayStation and PC by storm. is just absolutely awesome. It's a fun cooperative shooter where you run and gun with your friends, exploding aliens, calling down ordnance, dropping bombs, using heavy weaponry, accidentally killing yourselves in the process. It's just such a good time. And with the Starship Troopers inspiration here, the over-the-top parody, it just makes it that much more special. This is how you do a live service game. The fact that I barely even feel like it's a live service game. It's just a multiplayer game that they add things to occasionally. There's a battle pass, there's like stuff to grind out and collect, but ultimately it's just being in those moments, playing with your friends, blowing away giant enemies like, bugs and robots. It just makes it feel special. It's a good time, you'll have some laughs, it's nice and challenging. It's just a solid multiplayer game, the likes of which we don't see as often as we used to. Next, over at number 4, we have Pacific Drive. This is a really cool sci-fi game, a kind of survival game set in a region of the Pacific Northwest that's been cut off from the outside world because of scientific anomalies and time loop problems. So it's up to you to go through this area in your old beat-up car, researching, collecting items, scavenging, and upgrading your vehicle to go even further. And it is absolutely awesome. It is incredibly challenging, oftentimes kind of frustrating, but equally rewarding. Driving these lone roads at night with your car on the verge of breaking down and just unknown scientific anomalies and dangers around every corner, it just really makes every single run you do feel like a real adventure. This was one of my favorites of the year. The GameRanks crew really loved this one, and you should consider checking it out. Now, down over at number 3, we have Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is an action-adventure hack-and-slash game with a really unique feel to it. It's a post-apocalyptic future, and you play as Eve, a soldier designed only for eliminating these special creatures, and you set out to do that. She's agile, she has dodges, she has special dashes, special parry attacks, over-the-top attacks, and it makes for some really satisfying and incredible combat, especially when you're facing off with some over-the-top bosses. Some of the set pieces and big moments in this game are absolutely jaw-dropping. And I know Stellar Blade got a lot of word when it released, but I still think it's flying under the radar a bit. I think some people just wrote it off, or some people don't realize just how much fun it really can be. There are moments like with the main character and the story that just feel absolutely generic and kind of forgettable, but the moment-to-moment gameplay, the combat, and the adventuring is top-notch, and we totally recommend it. Now down at number 2, we have Rise of the Rōnin. This is essentially the developers behind Nioh 1 and 2 and Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, their take on something like a Ghost of Tsushima. You're going through feudal Japan, adventuring, hack and slashing in brutal, kind of Souls-like combat. The game is a little bit more forgiving than their previous games, and it does have some open world filler stuff here and there, but ultimately the combat is just so much fun, and getting around and traversing is so much fun that it makes up for some of the game's shortcomings. People have been absolutely loving this one because you can just create your own character and jump into this world. There's kind of like a 2-character rivalry dynamic that makes things a little bit more interesting. Historical characters show up, but this game also doesn't take itself too seriously. It's got good violence, good gore, some over-the-top moments, and even if it's flawed, it's absolutely worth playing. Now down at number 1, we have Dragon's Dogma 2. Dragon's Dogma 2 is essentially more Dragon's Dogma, and that is certainly not a bad thing. They took everything that worked with the original game, everything that people loved about that game, really a cult classic at this point, and they gave us more of it. It's a bigger, more dynamic, more interesting world. You have more pawns, and with that means more crazy over-the-top goofiness, but incredible enemies to face off against, great RPG systems. Dragon's Dogma 2 also just manages to feel different compared to other big open world fantasy RPGs out there. That's why we love the original game, and that's why we really like the second game. Capcom has done it again, so really, you should check it out at this point if you haven't. It's probably going to be one of the bigger games of the year. Those are 20 best games we got for you, but we also got a couple of bonus games we couldn't squeeze in a top 20. The first is Tales of Kenzera, Zao. I know we've talked a lot about 2D Metroidvania games, but this one's a little bit different, a little bit more focused on story and dialogue, and it's interesting. Also, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. If you're looking for exploration puzzle games, look no further, because people have been dubbing this one of the best puzzle games to release in years. Also, Ubisoft's X-Defiant, the multiplayer shooter that, to be honest, we didn't really love, has managed to find an audience and a player base, and it seems like people are digging it.